Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, men, women, children, all over the place, all over the world that are tuned on to the Life Signatures Radio, welcome aboard and thank you so much for doing the same. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. I don't know when you're listening to this episode, but this episode is being recorded somewhere in 2024. Maybe you might fall on it later on in life and so on, but welcome aboard this podcast. This podcast is daily and focuses a teaching podcast, actually teaching, motivating, inspiring. It is focusing on the subject matter of purpose and productivity and resilience. Those three things are what we focus on, and anything in between. We are in the middle of a series, ladies and gentlemen, where we're talking about raising spirit-led children. This should be something that should matter to you and to me and to anyone who is an educator, anyone who is a parent, anyone who is interested in the young people and so on, and even the young people themselves, because it makes sense what we're talking about here. There's one thing that we've neglected a lot when we're raising people over the generations, and you know what that is? It is people's spirits. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
So, even as we go deeper into this, yesterday we talked about the fasting. In fact, when we did a recap, we said that there are two ways in which we've been traditionally raising children. Number one is to beat them up at every point and at every turn. That a child is meant to be disciplined, and when a child makes a mistake, they are beaten up like a drum. When they rebel, they are beaten up like even two drums, right? And the other way of raising children was to pump information into them. Those two things are still existing even as we speak today. I know there are some countries that are making it criminal for you to punish your child, which is, again, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are things we do that have their place. But the problem is that they are negating the spiritual lives of people. We're living as a human race that are so out of tune and out of sync of our own spirits at the individual level, because we have not understood that we are spirits. We are much more faithful and much more true to the material world than we are to the spiritual world. And there are very many things that we normally do that are detrimental to raising a spirit-led child in any one of those two formats, either through disciplining, beating people up, or through the second one is pumping intelligence into them. And the first thing we talked about yesterday was cramming as a tool of educating, as a tool of mentoring. And we went at length and said how cramming cannot be thrown away, but we said it is detrimental to raising a spirit-led child because at the core of it, cramming doesn't provide for self-extraction. Now, the second thing I'm going to talk about today is as interesting as it is, and also it's something that you cannot throw away. You cannot throw the baby with the bathwater. Number two, you know you are not raising a spirit-led child when primarily you are focusing on competition. You know very many stories of, when we were growing up. When you come back home, you are asked for the report card at the end of the term. when you hand in your report card, the very first thing they're going to look at is your position in class. And no matter who you are, they're going to ask you, why were you not position number 1? Imagine all the parents asking 40, 50, 80 kids, why were you not position number 1? In other words, we have negated matters related to the spirit and the uniqueness and the differentness of everyone, and all we're looking for is occupying a particular position. And you see, in so doing, we are creating these unnecessary competitions, and every time there is a competition, let me tell you, the focus for the most part is never on the spirit. The focus for the most part is never on the individual. The focus is on conquering someone else. It is not, actually the focus is basically on beating a particular threshold. That, oh, that guy scored 87%. If I could have just gotten 88%, I would have, excelled, and so on. And so the position number 2, number 3, and number 4, they feel like they don't count. They feel like the only position is position number 1. The only position that counts is the number 1 position. And some teachers used to humiliate others. And they will start reading, the number 1 from bottom is, and they make your name known to the entire congregation of the school. And people will laugh. What does that do to your spirit? What does that do to your spirit? Do you want to tell me the spirit is foolish? Do you want to tell me the spirit is daft? Do you want to tell me the spirit is air-headed? Or let me say air-spirited? No, a million times no. These competitions, they have their place. But the core, the pillar of competing should never be to outdo other people. The pillar of competing should be to present our very best. In fact, we should not narrow ourselves into single positions, into few positions. In fact, I do think that everyone has their own position that they are supposed to ascend to. And the problem with this kind of thinking and this kind of thinking is that it's not easily actualized, because it means you will need, for every one student, you will need one teacher. And that's, by the way, that's how it's supposed to be. Which takes education back to the family. Especially now matters related to the spirit. It takes education back to the home. And guess what? In this day and in this age, people are yanking kids as young as 2 years of age and send them to school where the ratio of one teacher to the children is 1 to 40. Tell me, in that situation where there is, first of all, a skewed ratio of teacher to child to children, and then the spirit of competition, it is there. Tell me, how are we going to raise a spirit-led child in that environment? It's not going to work. What happens to you when you see someone else's child performing something extraordinarily? Do you celebrate, or do you want to force your child also to do the same thing? For the most part, they are going to make that person who was number 1 their reference. They're going to tell you, what's so special about that guy's son? What's so special about that lady's daughter? Why couldn't you do whatever it is that they did? That focus is not on you. That focus, you see, the focus should be, who are you? We know that you are gifted in A, B, C, and D. And from the results that we are seeing here, we think you did not apply yourself as you should. We think you left some things. We think that you are lazy this term. I'm not caring about the position you're taking. I'm caring about the productivity of your gift, of your talent, of your potential. It is not up to scratch. You need to better yourself. You need to beat yourself. You need to be better than you are. See? That is how you cultivate the spirit. You put the center of focus as the individual, not the person who conquered. Because the person who conquered and took number 1 is totally different. They have their own skill sets. They have their own potential. They have their own gifts and talents. They have their own environments through which they are being raised. Do you celebrate? Do you celebrate when your child wins? Do you celebrate it, or do you want to force your child to be like someone else's child who has won? Would you rather focus on the self-extraction process of the potential of this child of yours than having, but let me tell you this. I saw some things. There's some people who are naturally gifted. They don't even read. They don't. For you guys, you swat and you come second. Them, they went and they played and they did everything they could. And let me tell you, when they came first, it wasn't their best. It wasn't their best. They didn't apply themselves. They didn't extract themselves. They just, they were just there. And that's also not affecting them properly. It's not helping them to be spirit-led. Would rather encourage people to have this self-extraction of the potential that is within them, and encourage them to continue doing the same. So let's go to the child and see, in this competition related parenting or schooling, how are you raising this child? Is this child competing primarily to be better than the other children? Or is he competing to be the best version of himself or herself? You get the point? That's the self-extraction. The focus is on themselves. There is this natural tendency in all of us, to compete, to compare, to contrast with others. That is the ego, like we said. It is not the spirit. And remember, those two are always in constant fight. They are always fighting constantly. Competition, certainly, it has its place. Like we said, you don't throw competition. Don't throw the baby with the bathwater. But if it is not to strengthen the inner, the self-extraction process of the potential of this child, we are not raising spirit-led children. We are doing it wrongly. Let's understand that from the get-go, and let us act. The focus is not the competition. The focus is not the other child. The focus is this child. And I know we might say that the competition makes a reference point, but the reference point should be what is the spirit of this child. What is the difference that they bring on the face of the earth? What is their potential? That is what our focus should be on. Tomorrow we continue doing this. Until then, bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.